Hey everyone, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com. I'm hyped up on coffee and it's really late at night. I don't know why I'm doing a video right now, but here I am. Got a Pro Tools 11 review for you, finally, and I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's been a crazy summer, but if you're a Pro Tools user, then this video is for you because Pro Tools 11 is a humongous update. I'm not an advocate of just upgrading your DAW every single time a new version comes out, because rarely do you need every new feature. Pro Tools 11 is different in that it's not really a feature set release. It is a complete rewrite of the code. And so it's the same familiar interface we love, but it's completely rewritten. What you're looking at right now is actually Pro Tools 10, just so you know. There's a reason why. I'm going to show you the difference in power that you get with Pro Tools 11 on your current computer. And this is what's great is they finally went to a 64-bit application. It can take advantage of all of that RAM in your computer. It can take advantage of all the hyper-threading and multi-core processors that you have. It's just a much better written program. It's just scrapped 20 plus years of code and started fresh. Finally. So big deal in the Pro Tools world. Here's a session I've got with 48 tracks, which is just a nice healthy amount. You could do more tracks, but I wanted to max it out with some reverbs. So I've got deverbs everywhere. 5 deverbs on 48 tracks. You do the math. It's something like 240 plugins. Somebody check me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I got 240 reverbs on this right now with actual audio, actual cut up, moved around audio files as a real session. Then I duplicated some tracks out in Pro Tools 10. And you can see my CPU meter. It's hovering around 80%, 70%, and give you an idea of my playback engine. You know, of course, I maxed out my hardware buffer size to 1024. I have a i7 quad-core processor that hyper-threads, so it seizes 8 processors. You got to leave one open for the computer to do stuff. Otherwise, this program would start to shut down. So I've got 7 being used for Pro Tools, maxed out at 99%. I have delay compensation on maximum. Yeah, just typical. Give me the most juice I can for this system. I'm on a Mac, 2.0 gigahertz, i7 quad-core with 8 gigs of RAM. That gives you an idea. Pro Tools 10, 48 tracks, 240 deverbs, and yeah, some real audio in there. And, you know, I press play, and it can handle this. You know, it's playing all the tracks. It looks all funny, the really low meters, because it's all being washed in gobs of reverb. But you can see, like, the CPU meter is now in the mid-80s. And if I did anything else, 87, it's spiking up there. If I start to add a track or two or add a plugin or two, or if I want to do any automation or anything, I'm going to hit that limit real fast, okay? This is about as much as I can get out of this system to give you an idea. All right? Now, before we jump over to Pro Tools 11, let's just try something. What if I wanted to record something else on top of all this? I've already got 48 tracks, 240 plugins. I need to do an overdub recording of my lead guitar part, or I want to relay down some tambourine track or a harmony vocal. And I throw open a new track and I want to record, but I've got all that latency because now I'm monitoring with a hardware buffer size of 1024. Well, I mean, if you have a zero latency interface, that can help, but you're not really monitoring it through plugins or anything on the DAW. So if you wanted to be able to track through and hear all your plugins, if you drop the sample buffer size down, 64, 128, something like that, where you wouldn't hear the latency, now you press play and Pro Tools says no. CPU overload, no, increase the buffer size. I can't play 240 deverbs with 48 tracks at that low of a buffer size, so you can do a little bit of recording. Don't even think about it. And this is why you've always been encouraged to record first, then max out your plugins later, or bank on your zero latency interface and just have to mute the track in Pro Tools and not monitor through any plugins. That's just not going to happen, okay? Just want you to be aware of that. Put this back at 1024, and it can hang, but we're maxed out now, okay? Now let's go look at this exact same session in Pro Tools 11. All right, so here we are in Pro Tools 11, exact same session. What's the first thing you notice? The system usage is reading 1%, okay? Now, I know I'm not playing the audio, but this is a big difference before we even press play. Pro Tools 11, not only is it more robust of an audio engine, but it's got this dynamic plug-in processing. So it doesn't process or tax your CPU if it's not doing anything, right? And that makes so much more sense. Thank you, Avid, for finally doing this, because if you're not doing anything, you're just sitting there and you're about to get ready and record or press play, you shouldn't have to be taxing every waning second of your CPU and every little ounce of power to do nothing. Okay, so literally it's reading it at 1%. Now that's not real world, but if I press play now, the same session, remember how in Pro Tools 10, this was 85, 87%? We're looking at 35%, 29%. Do you notice that, how it spikes up now into the 60s, 70s? What you're looking at is something super cool. This is way more efficient because in the exact same part of the song with the exact same 240 D-verbs and the exact same 48 tracks on the exact same Mac, it's taking only 1/3 of the CPU power, right? So almost tripled my CPU power. It's 30% as opposed to 87%. Massive, massive change. What you noticed, though, was as the song progressed, it took up more CPU power. This is because there's a cool feature called dynamic plug-in processing. So literally, the plugins only tap your computer if they're being used, right? So literally, if you have audio on a track, then the plugin's going to be used. It's going to see this electric Les Paul track, and it's going to start taxing your CPU because there's something to process. But right before it, there's nothing. So then the plugin's going to notice, hey, there's no audio, even silent audio clip, there's nothing. So it's going to stop taxing the computer. Make a lot of sense, right? So it's beautiful. So in simple parts of the song, you're not going to use as much CPU power as in more complex parts of the song. Why should your computer be taxed way here in the intro when there's only one strat guitar part? Why should it be taxed when there's only one thing going on? It shouldn't be. And so Pro Tools is going to read it and go, oh yeah, we don't need that much. We can drop it down to 20%, 26%, no big deal. And then over here, if you got a ton of tracks going on, yeah, it's going to see it and go, okay, you got a bunch more tracks happening. They all have 5 D-verbs on them, so let's bump it up to 70%, 72%, whatever. When I stop it, it's reading all these different things. This is the power of Pro Tools 11, is that it is fluid. It only uses CPU power when it needs to, and it's much more efficient with the exact same computer that you have, right? It's doing nothing. It reads it. It's like, I don't need to process anything. And go back to the exact same session right here in this section where the Les Paul comes in. That used to take 85% of my CPU power. Now it only takes 35%. Humongous. Let's take it a step further. The hardware buffer size in Pro Tools 10 and below forever, there was one audio engine and it had a buffer size. It could be high, so you could get more juice out of your computer, but a lot more latency, or it could be low, so you could have a lot less latency, but then it's more taxing on your computer. We looked at that when we dropped this thing down to 128. We couldn't press play. Let's drop this thing down to 128. Click OK. Let's press play. Look at that. Still only 29, 30% CPU power at 128. It totally handles it. Let's drop it down to 32 samples. So we could totally record with like no audible latency. Totally handles it. 32 samples. Why is this possible? This is possible because now in Pro Tools 11, there's actually 2 audio engines. There's one on the way in and one on the way out. So there's like a mix audio engine that actually processes all the plugins, and it's constantly at a fixed buffer size, super high buffer size, and it's constantly set. And then this setting right here where it says hardware buffer size, what you're changing is the input buffer, okay? That's where you're actually changing the audible latency on the way in, but it actually doesn't change the hardware buffer for your plugins on the back end. That stays fixed at a nice high buffer size. I don't understand how that works and why that wasn't possible before. All I know is that it's possible now, and that means you can keep all those plugins, all 240 in this case reverbs and 48 tracks and all the audio, sailing just like they normally would, and you can drop the buffer size down, to 32, 64, 128, whatever, hit record and overdub all you need without any latency. That's massive, massive power and a lot more flexibility for that off chance that you unfortunately have to record something at the end of a mix session that just wasn't possible before in Pro Tools 10 and below. So in my mind, the biggest thing with Pro Tools 11 is all of this behind the scenes stuff. It's not flashy, it's not sexy, it's not going to change the way you mix, except for the fact that you're going to be able to get way more mileage out of your current computer, the one that you have today in your studio. Use the exact same hardware, the exact same RAM, the exact same audio interface. Nothing changes but the version of Pro Tools, and it's just that much more efficient. And now you can also max out the RAM if you use virtual instruments. It's going to be able to take advantage of all of that memory, and it's going to do all the hyper-threading and all the cores all by itself. You notice there's no drop-down box here in Pro Tools 11 to say, hey, use 7 processors or 3 processors and use 99% of them or use 85% of them. That was always the guessing game of find that perfect balance for your CPU where you get the most juice without crashing your DAW. And now in Pro Tools 11, it does it for you in the behind the scenes, and you can see it sort of sharing the load on all 8 cores that I have available to me. Super efficient, way more power on your current computer, and that's the big news in Pro Tools 11. The other big deal is offline bounce, and finally Pro Tools is caught up with all the other DAWs that have since come after it. Again, the great thing about Pro Tools is it's been around forever. The bad thing about Pro Tools is that it's been around forever, and it can't just start fresh without starting fresh, and that's a huge deal. So it could never do the offline bounce because it was never made for that. It was made for real-time processing with CPU chips outside the computer back in the day. And so now finally they recoded everything and just got it right. So you can do offline bounce, which is great because you don't have to bounce down in real time now. So you could take this track, 4-minute song, 48 tracks, all these deverbs, whatever, and you can go File, Bounce to Disk. And now you get bounce source like you normally would. Okay, the stereo. You can make it a wave. You could add an MP3. You can make it 16-bit. You could add to iTunes, all that normal stuff. Give it a name. Choose where you want it to go. We can say desktop. And then you can click offline. Click bounce. And what you're seeing is it was going from 1.5 times real time. Now it's going 3.5 times real time. It's already got a minute done. And you get the idea. Bounce things out very, very fast, very simple. You can also use that for track freeze. In my mind, that is the most useful feature upgrade. And then the power behind everything is humongous. And you just kind of had to see it to know what's going on. Obviously, major changes with the metering. This isn't as much of a feature set as it is just much better context for your mixes. You can see they've actually changed the scope of the metering. So what used to be like -18, -16, that range that I really like to see average volume at in my mixes, on Pro Tools 10, it would be way down on the bottom of the meter, like at 25% of the way up the meter. And so the problem is that doesn't look like a strong level, whatever that means. So people would always push the level way up top. But they finally balanced out a much better reading meter. So 18 dB -18 is right up here, right where it starts to kiss the yellow, which is great. So then now you can feel way cooler with your levels and you're still not recording too hot. So that's very practical, much better metering. If you have Pro Tools HD 11, you're going to have some much more, more metering options like RMS metering and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of features there. Gain reduction metering, a lot of cool things. You can read about those. They're not life-shattering to me. The big ones were the under-the-hood processing, offline bounce, and then just better throw, better metering, better graphics overall. For most of us, it's going to look and operate the same as Pro Tools 10, but there's a lot of feature enhancements, and it's just a much smoother, much more powerful piece of software. So it's the same Pro Tools you know and love, just with more power on your current computer. Hope that helps, guys. Pro Tools 11 is here. Go play with it. If you can afford the upgrade and you're thinking of your computer's getting too slow, this is a much cheaper upgrade than a new computer. If you can't afford it, just hang in there with Pro Tools 10 and wait till the next upgrade comes out. It's worth it if you need the juice. It's better than upgrading your computer. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. I'll talk to you on another video soon.